You walk through the glowing entrance into a vast chamber rising hundreds of feet high and filled with snow-white alabaster pillars, 4 to 5 feet in diameter. But as you step fully into the chamber and look up, you realize the pillars are not made of stone. They are quite alive and capped with umbrella-like covers, looking like colossal toadstools. These toadstools aren't brown or gray as they are on the surface. It seems as if the sunlight is passing through a prism, bringing with it every primary color of the rainbow to this stunning wonderland. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, along with delicate blends of these colors as well. However, each individual hue is so luminous and brilliant they are barely recognizable compared to common surface colors, which now seem muddy and heavy in comparison. You notice that many of the colored caps are marked with white diamond shapes, circles, or other geometrical patterns. Looking around, you see that some of the stems are deep crimson, blue, or green, all standing in straight rows, as if they have been purposely planted in perfect symmetry. You touch one of the stems, expecting it to feel slightly cold and clammy, just as a toadstool in a forest might have felt. But it is wonderfully warm, velvety soft, and surprisingly fragrant. Are these poisonous like the little ones we have on the surface? You ask. No, not at all. Here they grow in perfect conditions. There is no pollution. Nothing ever changes. The temperature, the minerals they feed on, and the water they need, everything stays constant. So they are, well, perfect. You walk up to a bright red toadstool that is only 4 feet tall and say, this is so odd. It smells like strawberries. Taste it, says Asha, grinning. Gently you tear off a small piece of the toadstool and say, it tastes just like a strawberry, but like the best strawberry I've ever had. How's that possible? Well, you're not surprised that an apple, a strawberry, and a rose have the same color. Why be surprised when flavors are the same? Says Asha enthusiastically. The various colors of these plants are recognizable from colors you've seen on the surface. Why shouldn't you recognize the flavors as well? You hurry over to a golden toadstool with round white spots and say, this one tastes like pineapple. And then rushing to an indigo blue stem, you inhale the fragrance of fresh blueberries. If I didn't know better, I'd say I was dreaming. This is where these plants are meant to grow and live. That's why they're so phenomenal, says Asha, gently stroking a soft white stem. You want to stay and explore this grown-up fairyland, but you know you've already lost sense of time, and you need to get back if there's any chance of saving Matthew. After walking a brief distance, you enter a cavern with brilliant, sparkling crystals, monstrous and cube-shaped, a foot or so in diameter. It seems as if the crystals have been stacked one on top of another, creating a wall here and a cliff face there. Some of the stones are smaller, so you bend down to pick up a square crystal the size of your hand. Lick it, says Asha. You lick it and say with surprise, it's salt. Yes, this is a dried salt bed from what used to be an underground lake. You think for a moment, then ask, but how could an entire lake evaporate if we're this deep underground? It couldn't, and it didn't, says Asha logically. The water travels to the surface and comes out as a fresh spring. You're sure there must be an interesting science lesson on the way, But before you can ask any more questions, you suddenly come to a broad chasm that stretches out for what seems like miles in both directions. You tentatively approach the ominous ledge, complete with a sheer cliff that looms over a barely visible cavern floor far below. You let out a frustrated yelp. There is literally no way down, no way back, and no way across. "What do we do now?" you ask in a complete panic. "Let's jump down," says Asha lightly. "Very funny," you say, laughing awkwardly. "You can teleport, but if I jump, I'll break my neck." "No, you won't," says Asha confidently. "Jump up and see what happens." Doubtfully, you jump half-heartedly, and with no effort at all, you find yourself bounding a full 6 feet into the air, then landing lightly back on your feet. Your face is a curious blend of shock and utter delight. "See what I mean?" says Asha, smiling brightly as she steps off the cliff. She falls as slowly and softly as an autumn leaf on a warm, still day. Arriving gracefully at the bottom, she calls up to you encouragingly, "Come on, you'll be fine." Even watching Asha isn't enough to remove your fear, so you practice breathing into the hollowed-out feeling in your stomach. Amazingly, the energy begins to soften. You take a deep breath, and as you step off the ledge, reminding yourself that Asha was right there if anything were to go terribly wrong, you drift down, practically weightless. And though it seems completely impossible, it was happening, and there is no arguing with reality. When you finally touch down, you are so excited you skip and hop with joy, which under the current conditions translates into soaring leaps and bounds across the canyon floor. All feelings of fear and hopelessness vanish, and in a matter of minutes you are running up the sides of the canyon walls and pushing yourself off, bouncing off the ground, and with only the slightest effort you are flying a full 10 to 20 feet into the air. You have never felt happier or more alive and free in your entire life. You and Asha leap over chasms with no effort. You then skip down a declining slope that goes on for miles and miles, but you feel completely energized and not the least bit tired. "How is this possible?" you say, laughing with joy. "What you would call gravity is changing," says Asha knowledgeably. Finally, the cavern opens up, and there before you stretches a vast lake that seems to reach out into infinity. The water looks as smooth as glass. There is absolutely no movement upon its surface, not a single ripple, and you can see the rocks lying below the water's surface just as clearly as the rock ceiling overhead. There are surface reflections, but no shadows. Everything glows softly, causing the water to look like nothing you've ever seen before. "This is extraordinary," you say, smiling at Asha. "The lake is lit from above, below, and all around." Grinning, Asha says, "Well, it's no more extraordinary than the sun shining in the first place." You laugh. "I guess you're right." Together you climb around the lake until you come to a metal boat. Without the slightest effort, Asha easily picks up the boat and places it in the water, even though it's many times her size. She steps into it, then directs you to follow and sit at the stern facing the bow. Your bodies are so light, they barely cause the boat to move when you climb in and sit down. Your back is to the shore as you watch Asha slowly and carefully turn a small lever resting on a part of the boat that projects up from the hull. There is no movement, and nothing seems to be happening. So after a few minutes you say, "Is there a problem? Is there something we have to do to get the boat started?" Asha laughs and says,
"We've been on our way since the moment you sat down."
"What?" you say incredulously. "That can't be right. We haven't been moving at all."
"Look over your shoulder. Do you see the shore?"
You whip around and see nothing but miles and miles of water with no shoreline in sight. You laugh. "I don't understand. We don't have oars or wind or even a motor. How is this possible?"
"We're moving on a current of Earth's electromagnetic energy," says Asha.
With no feeling of movement, the velocity increases each time Asha touches the lever, until at last the boat rises almost completely out of the water, like a bird skimming over the surface. With no shore in sight, you can't estimate your speed. You find a tissue in your pocket, tear it in half, and throw a piece into the air. "If we're moving fast, why isn't there any wind?" you ask as the tissue falls softly to your feet.
"There's a protective shield in front of our boat. It's invisible, and its shape causes the wind to move around us without slowing us down,"
says Asha. "How fast are we going?" you say. "About 900 miles an hour, says Asha, as if this is a normal occurrence.
"Normally, friction would heat up a metal boat and become a big problem at this speed. But the lake below us keeps the boat cool, and we're almost as light as air."
At this point, your mind can't comprehend another thing. The lack of gravity makes no sense. But of course, you're witnessing this yourself, and it makes you wonder how many scientific theories are completely erroneous. At last you find a pillow and a blanket under your seat and curl up in the bottom of the boat, your thoughts drifting away until you fall soundly asleep. When Asha finally awakens you, you have no sense of time whatsoever. You don't know if you've been asleep for days or hours or just a few minutes. Stepping out of the boat and onto the shore, you see a slanting sheet of light that appears fan-shaped off in the distance. You can see nothing beyond that light, but as you and Asha bound quickly across, approaching the rim of the rock floor, you see the light is streaming in from below, as an immense break that stretches across your path. It appears to be limitless, bottomless, and springing up from what seems to be a fissure in the earth. You walk a bit farther and stand on the brink of the chasm, staring out into the brilliant, shimmering light. The light doesn't dazzle your eyes. Rather, it possesses an indescribable beauty, illuminating everything in all directions. If love could take form, you believe this light would be that form. As you peer over the edge, wondering what you will do next, Asha says,
"Below us is a hollow in the earth, and the light is actually reflecting up from the space below, and that's where we're headed." "Amelia, look!" says Asha, pointing.
You turn in the direction Asha indicates and see a ship covered in ice and snow, floating in the distance, its sails full as it moves swiftly in the wind. "Is that a mirage?" you say, filled with wonder.
"No, it's real. Everything on Earth has an imprint in another place, and every event is recorded."
"But how are we seeing a ship?"
"Well, matter is reproduced in a so-called vacancy. What you see is like unseen pages where all events are recorded. As that ship sailed over the ocean above us, it disturbed a current of energy and left an impression, sort of like a holographic image of the ship on a zone beneath it that's parallel with the spot where we are.
We're seeing a holographic version of that ship? That sounds crazy.
No more crazy than things are thoughts, or the idea of subatomic particles that can be waves and then turn into particles depending on your focus.
You laugh, relieved to be distracted from the leap of faith you're about to take.
Are you ready to jump?
Says Asha, smiling and holding out her hand. Your heart is in your throat as you grasp Asha's hand and say, I'm ready, as you step off the cliff together. You throw your arms around Asha, fearing you might lose each other as you fall into the abyss, and then close your eyes tightly, afraid to see what is coming.
Open your eyes,
says Asha encouragingly.
You have nothing to fear.
You peek out of one eye and then open both eyes.
You can loosen your grip. I promise you won't lose me,
says Asha, laughing. Oh, sorry, you say apologetically. Though you don't let go immediately, you loosen your grip more and more until you finally let go. And with your arms outstretched, you feel as if you're flying. The wind moves gently past your body and through your hair, and it isn't too loud or cold or uncomfortable. Even the light surrounding you is peaceful and calm. You discover you can easily move any part of your body. Speaking loudly, Asha says,
The wind that's blowing now will lessen. The faster we fall, the more the atmosphere is decreasing. It will completely disappear in just a few minutes.
As predicted, the air movement ceases and you feel as if you're lying in bed, perfectly supported, comfortable and resting.
We're still moving at a phenomenal speed, but the atmosphere is no longer the same. That's why there isn't any friction.
Then, as if reading your mind, Asha adds,
Don't worry, we'll slow down long before we reach our destination.
You understand the concept of the atmosphere disappearing, but from an experiential point of view, it feels as if you are no longer moving. At first you think you're dreaming, but then you realize you're wide awake and still falling through space. Yet it feels more like floating on a cloud with absolutely no sense of time. You feel deliriously happy and completely at peace. It's as if you don't have a care in the world.
Asha, can I ask you a question?
You say dreamily.
Of course.
Well, I had this experience where I don't know what happened exactly, if I left my body or I teleported, but I went back to a time when I was living in Russia. Nodding her head, Asha says,
I can see all of your waitress lifetimes.
Oh, good, you say, grateful you don't have to explain anything in detail, but wishing you could see things the way Asha does. Well, here's the thing. I really loved it there. And if I'd had a choice and no family or friends, I wouldn't have wanted to come back. I just keep thinking about it all the time and wishing it was real. I mean, not that it isn't real, but it's not real now. It's not even possible now. And it makes me sad because the way the waitress lived, well, it would solve every problem on Earth. But no one even knows they existed, and even if I tried to tell people, no one would listen.
You don't need anyone to listen. You can create that way of life all by yourself,
says Asha confidently. Oh, you don't understand. There are so many laws, and there's no such thing as free land, and no one lives that way anymore.
When you think about your life when you were a waitress, how does it feel?
You think for a moment and say, I feel excited. It's sort of like when I've seen the first 2 parts of a trilogy and I know I love it and I love all the actors and I've been waiting a whole year to find out what's going to happen. It's that kind of excitement. And even though I know it was thousands of years ago, I miss it. I really do. Why can't people live like that if they want to?
Anyone can live like that if they want to, says Asha. In fact, you're already starting to create that.
Well, maybe I'm teleporting or having unusually vivid dreams, but I'm pretty sure it's just in my imagination, you say, shaking your head.
You're not just imagining something, says Asha. You're feeling what it's like to be there, right?
You nod.
That means you're in the process of creating your own version of that reality.
But it no longer exists, you say, disheartened.
Okay, let's step back for a moment,
says Asha patiently.
This is the most important thing for you to remember. Your feelings create everything that happens to you, including the physical world around you. You first begin to understand the binary code when you feel safe or unsafe, and act accordingly. But the binary code also responds to the feeling of yes or no, or you could think of it as love or fear. So when you imagine your life as a Vedras, and you have that feeling of love and excitement that you described, you're telling the program, yes, I want to create this. And the more vividly and consistently you feel it, the more powerfully you cause it. But when you focus on your world, the people, the politics, the corporations, you see it as solid and unchanging. Your idea starts to feel hopeless, and then you worry that what you want can't possibly happen, or that it's not happening fast enough. Or maybe you're afraid that you're not doing it right. Well, when that happens, when you worry, you are actually causing the program to create more of what you don't want.
But if it's such an intelligent program, you say, exasperated, why doesn't it understand what I don't want?
Because the program doesn't perceive right or wrong, good or bad. It only responds to focus. And that brings us back to Einstein,
says Asha, grinning.
Imagination is more important than knowledge. So be sure you are imagining what you want, not what you don't want. And remember, there is no one on earth who's powerful enough to stop your imagination. Of course, they can try to convince you that you're just making things up that don't matter, but it's up to you whether you believe that or not. Oh, and one more thing. You will never know how anything is going to happen. That's part of the fun and games of it all. So don't worry about it. Everything has a way of working itself out. And on that subject,
says Asha happily,
we're getting very close to our destination.
I'm feeling gravity again, you say excitedly. What's happening?
This won't be easy to understand because of what you've been taught. But we're entering the inner earth,
says Asha.
But that isn't quite accurate. This earth is more like a parallel earth.
What do you mean?
The continents here are exactly the same as your continents on the surface, except this inner earth is on a different dimension. It's a parallel reality. The atmosphere changes between dimensions and allows your body some time to adjust. It's a lot like deep-sea diving. Your body has to acclimate to the change in pressure. Between the two dimensions is what you might call a 0 point, which is the energy that remains when all other energy is removed from a system.
I don't understand, you say.
Imagine you're a fish that can breathe underwater with gills or air with lungs. Now pretend air is one dimension and water is another dimension. 0 point would be the moment where you could no longer use your lungs, but you can't use your gills yet either. So we've been moving through third-dimensional energy, and it was gradually resolving to 0 point, where there is no atmosphere. In fact, there is no air in 0 point.
Well, then how did we manage to breathe?
You gradually stopped needing to breathe. Didn't you notice? In this moment, your heart isn't beating either.
How can I possibly be alive? You say, then with a shock you add, am I still alive?
What do you think? Of course you're alive. In fact, don't you feel more alive than before?
You shake your head. I don't understand. I don't need to breathe. My heart doesn't need to beat. And I feel better than ever.
Think of it like this. Imagine you're lying in bed in your 3D world. As you stop falling asleep, your breathing slows down and so does your heartbeat. That would be like moving towards 0 point. And the next thing you know, you're in a parallel reality. What you would think of as your dream, where you have no heartbeat and you don't breathe.
But that's a dream.
Well, you've been educated to call it a dream. But what if you're a multidimensional being? What if you're actually a cosmic superhero, capable of coming and going between dimensions all the time?
A cosmic superhero? Oh, I'm just sure, you say with joking sarcasm.
I've been trying to tell you. Faulty education. You're going to be completely shocked when you discover the truth about your entire existence. And I don't mean the simple fact that you're playing a game. I'm referring to the most common, fundamental things you believe about life on Earth. But that discussion will come later,
says Asha, laughing.
Let's get back to what's happening. We've moved through 0 point, where you felt nothing, and now we're gradually acclimating to air and atmosphere on the other side of 0 point. It's as if you're now using your gills instead of your lungs. Does that help?
Well, sort of, you say, trying to get your head around the idea. Are you saying that this 0 point is shared by both dimensions?
Yes, that's it exactly. It's sort of like the nothing that's really everything.
You shake your head and sigh. Oh, I'm lost again.
Stop trying to use your mind. It's highly overrated,
says Asha, grinning.
Use your imagination as you think of the space, the nothing between worlds. Without it, nothing would make sense. Or the pause in music that makes a composition transcendent. It's the nothing that's everything. Or imagine the moment between breathing in and breathing out. So think of your journey from one dimension to another as an exhale followed by an inhale. They are different yet connected. One cannot exist without the other, and they both share the same 0 point. But the world of the inhale is quite different than the world of the exhale. Yes, the lungs are the same, but the function is completely different.
Was that analogy supposed to make it easier for me to understand? You say, now in somewhat of a panic, as a sheer grey cliff looms larger and larger in front of you. Never mind, it doesn't matter. How are we going to stop without crashing into that cliff? You yell anxiously.
Have you noticed that we've begun moving toward that cliff in a way that would be impossible without propulsion?
Says Asha calmly. Yes, how's that possible? You say nervously.
I'm simply using the power of my mind.
says Asha succinctly. You look even more petrified.
You can try it yourself. All you do is wish to move to the right and see what happens.
You wish to move to the right and are stunned to see the distance between you widen.
Now wish to circle around me,
says Asha. You obey, and you circle around Asha, laughing with delight. Then Asha pulls a crystal out of her pocket and throws it into the air. The crystal floats right alongside her, as if she was sitting down and had placed it on a table beside her.
Now call for the crystal. Tell it to come to you.
You do, and the crystal floats to you, landing right in the palm of your hand. Never in your life have you been more surprised than in that moment. Asha laughs and says,
Things are thoughts. That's why thoughts influence things. Or maybe it's thoughts influencing thoughts.
Are you just trying to confuse me? You say, laughing. You still have quite a distance to travel before arriving at your destination, so Asha says,
Think of how strongly you would feel if you were face to face with a grizzly bear. Now wish with that level of intensity that we move rapidly forward toward our destination. We'll unite our energies and do this together, which will be far more powerful than what we could ever do alone.
You look at where you're headed and intensely wish to be there. The distant cliff is suddenly so close, Asha yells,
Stop! We're coming in too fast! Make a wish that we're motionless.